Hey everybody, welcome back to this episode of Kauffman Analytics. Have you ever wanted to know how to build a Twitter bot but weren't sure where to begin? Well, stick around because that's what we're going to do today. We're going to walk through how to build a Twitter bot from start to finish. The first thing that you need to do is sign up for a Twitter developer account at developer.twitter.com, or you can also click this link right here. You do need to be logged into your regular Twitter account to use this functionality, so make sure you're logged into your Twitter account first. Once you've created your Twitter developer account, the first thing you're going to want to do is create an app. Let's start by giving our app a name here. I'm just going to call this Kauffman Analytics, and then I'll click on Get Keys. You can always change this later, so don't stress about the name too much. And once you've created your app and given it a name, it will take you to the next screen, which it provides you three critical pieces of information that you're gonna need down the road in just a few minutes. Your API key, your API key secret, and your bearer token. Now you can see mine on the screen here, but don't let anyone ever see any of your keys because then they'd have full access to your app. They could do anything they want to it. I'm going to delete my keys or regenerate them in just a few minutes, so these are worthless to anybody. Once you've saved these keys in a secure location, then go ahead and click on Skip to Dashboard. It's going to pop up with a little warning message there asking you to confirm that you've saved your keys and your tokens. Assuming you've already done this, go ahead and click on Yes, I saved them. Now that we have all of our key, secret key pairs, and our bearer token, we need to go down here under Products, and then click on where it says Twitter API v2. And up top here, you see that there are three different levels. In our case, we want to build a Twitter bot that is going to post to Twitter on our behalf. Then we need elevated access. So over here under elevated, we need elevated access for our project. So we're going to click on Apply. This is a pretty straightforward process. We just really need to tell Twitter what we want to do with our bot. We're not going to do anything malicious or evil with it. So just make sure that all of this information is correct. Select your current level. We'll call it some experience. And no, I don't really need updates. And then I'm going to click on Next. And then there's a couple things that we need to fill out here. We need to tell it, what in our own words we want to use this bot for, specifics. They want to know whether we want to use our app to tweet, retweet, like, follow, direct message type of functionality. We need to determine whether or not we're going to display tweets or aggregate data about Twitter content outside of Twitter to some other platform. They want to know whether we'll use our product, service, or analysis to make Twitter content or derived information available to a government entity. A lot of this stuff is somewhat irrelevant. I'm going to go ahead and fill this out now. I've filled out all the information here and I'm on to the review page. I just intend to use this bot to tweet out anytime that Kauffman Analytics and the YouTube channel posts a new video. The Twitter bot will tweet that out with a link. So I'm just going to go down here and click Next. These fields are blanked out because I did not elect to provide any tweets or information to government entities. I won't be showing any tweets off of Twitter, and I have no use case for analyzing Twitter data. So click Next. This is just the terms. I'm going to agree to their developer policy. It's very standard. And now I'm clicking Submit. This is going to take about 2 seconds. This is very, very quick. I now have elevated access. But there are two pieces that we need to do real quick before this becomes live. For one, under the project and the Kauffman Analytics piece you see here, the environment is still set to development. So let's go ahead and edit that. We're going to change this to be production. Click Save there, and then the other piece is that we need to change in our user authentication settings. So we're going to click Setup. I'm going to focus here on OAuth 1.0a. So I'm going to click to turn this on, and then I'm going to select Read and Write, and then you need to put in a callback URL and a website URL. So I've already added those in. I'm going to click Save. Now there's one last thing that I need to do here. Over in my keys and tokens area, I need to generate access token and a secret. So I'm going to click Generate there, and then I'm going to make sure that I copy and save these into a secure location that I can readily access in a few minutes when I go to write some code. All right, yes, I've saved them. And now make sure that this says created with read and write permissions. That's really important there. If you generate your access token and your secret token here, prior to updating your user authentication settings to allow for read and write permissions, later on when you go to write your code and you execute your code, then you're going to get an error warning that looks like this. So if you see that 401 error code, come back to your keys and tokens and double check that you have read and write permissions on your access token and your secret token. All right, cool. We now have a way of programmatically accessing Twitter, but we want our bot to actually do something. So for that, we're going to need to write a little bit of code. And that is where the AWS cloud comes in. You can use any cloud provider that you like, Google or Azure. I personally prefer AWS. It's my favorite, but feel free to use any one you like. If you don't already have an AWS account, you can create one at aws.amazon.com. So go ahead and create that now. All right, now that you've created your AWS account, we're going to be writing our code in what's called a Lambda function. So go ahead and click on Lambda functions here, and we're going to do two examples. I'm first going to walk you through a very simple hello world type Twitter bot, and then the next one is going to be a slightly more complex Twitter bot where we incorporate Lambda, S3, do a little bit of web scraping, scrape an image off the web, store it into S3, and tweet that out using our Lambda function to our Twitter account. I'm going to change my region here to Northern California only because I know that I don't have any Lambda functions out in the Northern California region. So that way this will be a little bit cleaner, a little bit easier for anyone watching this to follow along, so you don't get confused by any other Lambda functions that I may have otherwise had out there. I'm going to click on Create Function here. And there's a lot of different options. You can author from scratch, use a blueprint, a container image. You can browse the serverless app repository. These are all really cool, and I would recommend that you explore these options at some point because they are really, really powerful. But for our purposes here, we're going to author from scratch. The first thing we need to do if we're going to author a Lambda function from scratch is enter some basic information. So I'm going to call this my Kauffman Analytics Twitter bot. And then the next we need to do is choose our runtime. This is the programming language that we would like to run our code in. I'm going to choose Python 3.9. And then for permissions, I'm going to create a new role. Clicking on create a new role with basic Lambda permissions will create a role on your behalf, so you don't really have to do anything, so that's pretty easy. We're not going to do anything with advanced settings, but you could if you wanted to. Once you've done that, I'm going to move myself out of the way. You're going to click on this create function, and this is going to take a few minutes, and it is going to provision your Lambda function permissions, everything that you need to execute your Lambda function. All right, this has set up our Lambda function for us. If you scroll down a little bit, you can see this code source. This is where we're actually going to write our code. And anytime you create a Lambda function here, this comes up with some kind of boilerplate code. We're going to clear this out, and we're going to write our own. So I'm going to expand this to be full screen here. And now we can write some code. Okay, so let's go ahead and write our hello world Twitter bot. The first thing we want to do, we're going to want to import our OS, so that we can use environment variables. The next thing we want to do is import Tweepy. And if you're not familiar with Tweepy, it is a Python library that allows you to access the Twitter API using Python. It's a really, really cool library. So let's import Tweepy. Next thing we want to do is determine our environment variables. So let's do API key equals os dot environ API key. The next is our API secret key equals os dot environ API secret. Then we want our bearer token. Environ. Then we would like to do our access token. And finally, our access secret token. Forgot the T. All right, there we have our environment variables. Now, and this is really cool, you're really gonna like this. We need 4 lines of code to tweet. So check this out. We're gonna do auth equals tweepy dot o handler, and then we need to pass in our API key and API secret. There's one line of code. Then we do auth.set access token, and we pass in our access token and secret access token. There's 2 lines of code. So what these 2 lines of code are doing here is authenticating to Twitter. And then we need to create an API object, okay? And to do that, we are going to do API equals tweepy dot API, and then we pass in our authorization. All right, that's 3 lines of code. And finally, this is where we actually determine what we would like to tweet. So we're going to create a tweet here. And we're going to do API dot update status. And we're going to say, hello world. Okay, now that we have our code written, we need to go back and add these values to our environment variables, because right now they're not doing anything, they're empty. So let's go ahead and click out of this, and then we're going to click over here into configuration, and then environment variables. And we don't have any environment variables right now, so let's click edit, and we're going to add environment variable. Now let's add our key value pair here for each one. All right, so I went ahead and added all of my environment variables here for my API key, secret, var token, access secret token. Never, ever, ever share these with anybody, but I'm gonna delete these and change them around before this video even gets published, so no worries. So I'm gonna click save here, and these keys need to correspond to the values that you wrote in your code. So API key, API secret, bearer token, access secret token, etc. Now we've got our code written. So what we need to do is deploy this. So click on this deploy, and that'll take a few seconds, and it's going to update the function. It's successfully updated, so we have no syntax errors or anything like that. Now we want to create a test. So click on this drop down here, test, and we're just going to call this test because I'm terrible at creating test events. Leave this boilerplate there, and then click save. Now, when we click test here, so this errored out, right? And the reason that it errored out is that it's unable to import no module named tweepy. Now this is because we have to do something called layering. We have to layer our Lambda function because the runtime for Python does not include every single possible module or library or framework that's out there for Python. We need to provide the code for tweepy. That's where layers comes in. So I'm going to shrink this down, and underneath where you see our Lambda function here, you see this layers. So let's click on this, and here is where we add our layers. Here's where we add our kind of non-standard module, if you will. So we want to click on, let me move myself out of the way. We want to click on add a layer, and then we'll choose specify an ARN. An ARN is an Amazon resource number. Click on that, but now we need a specific ARN in which to build our layer, or to add our layer. So here's where I'm going to cheat just a little bit. Normally you'd want to build your own layer, which is a kind of a little bit more involved and engaged than I want to get into in this tutorial, because you'd have to create all the the dependencies and zip it all up in a zip file and upload it. So I'm not going to go through all that. So where we can cheat a little bit is there is an excellent GitHub repo out here by a guy named Keith Rosario. So big shout out to Keith. Way to go, man. I use this constantly. So what K-Layers is a collection of Python, AWS, Lambda layers that you can simply use by copying and pasting the ARN that's associated with that layer into your Lambda function. And it's broken out by region and by runtime. So I'm in the layers for Python 3.8. Now these are broken out by AWS region. And here's the AWS region name. But if you recall, we're developing in the Northern California region, which is US West 1. Okay, so we need to go down this list and find US West 1, which is the second one from the bottom. Now you can download this as a JSON file or a CSV file, but what we're going to do here, since we're just copying and pasting, we're going to do HTML. So when you go into the HTML version, you see all the different packages and the package versions for the various different layers that exist out here. Now we want Tweepy, which is right here. So I'm going to copy this ARN, and then I'm going to go back to my Lambda, and I'm going to paste this in right here. Just click Add. Now once that finishes adding the layer, it brings you right back into your Lambda function here. So now we have one layer. We have Tweepy. Now that we have our Tweepy layer, we can go ahead and test this again. And this failed because it's missing the Lambda handler. So I'm missing a very important line of code here. Trying to go too fast, and this is what happens. So I need to define my Lambda handler, of course. Lambda underscore handler, and then pass in the event and context. And then we'll want to indent these to be under. There we go. Now deploy this. And now we can test. Okay, so that failed. So let's go into configuration. And we're going to go into general configuration. And we're going to up our memory here. So in basic settings, the memory by default starts at 128 megabytes. Let's up this to 1,000 randomly. You can go up to 10,000 megabytes, but let's just go up to 1,000 for right now. Click Save. And let's try running this code again. And that worked. We have the status of succeeded. Fantastic. So let's go over to our Twitter account and confirm that there is actually a tweet that says hello world. And there we go. 15 seconds ago, we tweeted hello world, which is exactly what the body of our Lambda said we should tweet. Let's give this one more try, and we'll just say, I love Lambda functions. Click deploy. We successfully updated our function here. Now let's click test. And again, that was successful. Let's go over here, refresh. And there we go. I love Lambda functions. Awesome. Now we have a Hello World Twitter bot. We've walked through how to set up, design, and execute a basic Twitter bot. But what if we want to do something a little more complicated? What if we'd like to add in some functionality? I'm thinking that we should scrape an image off the internet, save it to an S3 instance, and then tweet that image out through our Twitter bot. Let's see how we can do that. In this example, since we're going to scrape an image off the internet, save it down to a location in the cloud, and then tweet it out, first we need to set up our S3 bucket that we will save our image to. So let's do that now. On the console homepage, click on S3, And for those eagle-eyed viewers that might notice that this says global up in the top right hand of the corner, that's because S3 is not constrained to any specific region. So let's go ahead and click on create a bucket here. We're going to give this a name. I'm going to call mine Kauffman Analytics. And I just got done saying that S3 does not have a region. It's global. But since we're going to be drawing from our Lambda function, which is region specific, we're going to leave this as US West 1. Now, usually I would suggest making your ACLs enabled. That's best practice, but for this tutorial, we're going to leave these disabled. We're going to block all public access. We're going to leave our bucketing versioning disabled, and we're not going to add any tags. So this is about as simple and as straightforward as it gets. I'm going to click on create a bucket. Oh, I did not like my underscore here. So I'll take that underscore out and click on create bucket. Okay, our bucket has been created, and you can see that we have our Kauffman Analytics bucket that we just created here. So this is going to be the storage container that we're going to send our image that we scraped from the internet into. But now we need to write a bit of code to actually make all of that happen. So we got to go back to our Lambda function and let's write some code. This is the function that we wrote a little while ago that tweeted out our simple hello world text string to our Twitter account. We're going to take this and we're going to modify this so that it does the web scrape and saves it to S3 and then tweets out the image. We need a few more modules to make this work. So we've already got our OS for our environment variables and we've got our Tweepy module imported. But we also now would like to import requests. Also, we want to, from IO, import bytes IO. And finally, we'll also want to import Boto3. Boto3 is the standard Python module for all things AWS. So import Boto3. Oops, this needs to be lowercase. All right, cool. And then we've got our environment keys for our Twitter account here, but we also need to add 2 more environment variables for our AWS account, our AWS key and our AWS secret key. I've already added those environment variables, which I will not be sharing because those I actually use in the live environment. So I will go ahead and add those. AWS access key ID equals os.environ AWS access key ID, and then AWS secret access key equals os.environ So I'm going to comment this line out, because we're now no longer updating our status with a text string. So we will not be using that line of code anymore. So what I want to do here is I want to take this image of fluffy puppy dogs and I want to tweet this image out. So what we need is to copy this URL link. It's just a random picture I picked from the internet. And I'm going to call this my image URL, and I'll put that right there. And we need to define the name of the bucket that we created a little bit ago, and I called that Kauffman Analytics. So I'm going to copy that and paste that as a text string here. Now what we need to do is create an S3 client. And we do that by doing S3 equals Boto3 dot client. S3. And then we need to pass in our AWS access key ID as well as our secret access key. I'm going to put this on multiple lines just so it is easier to read. All right, there we have created our S3 client. Next, using our S3 client, I want to write the line of code that will upload our file object. We can do that by s3.upload underscore file obj, and then we want to pass in the image itself, the bucket name, and the actual name of the file. We're going to call this ryan.png. Perfect. Next, we want to create a resource. I'm going to call this s3.resource because I lack imagination with naming things. Bodo 3.resource, and the type of resource will be S3, and then we want to pass in our credentials. And again, I'm going to put this on multiple lines to make this easier to read. And then we will do s3.bucket. Oh, I need a capital B here. s3.bucket. Download file. And the name of our file. And then \temp, or /temp /Ryan.png. Now, there's an important but subtle point that I want to make here. I've been talking about tweeting this out from the Amazon S3 bucket, but that's not strictly speaking correct. What is actually happening here is that we are scraping it from the web. The Lambda function is uploading it to the S3 bucket and then downloading it into the Lambda ephemeral space, which is a temp folder within the Lambda function itself. And then it's tweeting it out from that temp space. So let me know in the comments below if you have any questions, comments, or concerns on that. Okay, so then let's make our status equal I love dogs. This will be the text string that we tweet with the image. And you might notice that we've handled all of our AWS components here, the Lambda and the S3, but we haven't actually scraped anything from the internet yet. We've imported our request library that will allow us to do so, but we haven't actually done that yet. So what we're going to do here, I'm actually going to put this up top. I'm going to call this my response. Oops, this needs to be below the URL. Response equals requests dot get, and then we're going to pass in the URL. This is the line of code that actually goes out to this URL and gets all of the response, all of the details, the data associated with that URL. And then we're going to do image equals bytes.io and response dot content. This takes the data that we pull in this response and parses it out. Finally, we need to go down here, and we cleared this line out because we don't want to just simply do an update status now, but we still want to create our tweet, and we're going to do API dot update underscore with underscore media. And we're going to be tweeting directly from that temp folder in the Lambda function. So /temp /Ryan.png. That will handle the picture, and then comma status will handle the text string. So what we should expect when we deploy this is a tweet saying, "I love dogs," with this picture attached. All right, let's deploy and try this one more time, and that failed. Why did this fail? On line 35, S3 has no attribute bucket. That's because I'm calling the .bucket method on the S3 client as opposed to the resource. So let me change this. S3 underscore resource .bucket. Now let's deploy that. Give this a second here. Successfully updated the function. All right, let's test this now. And that test was successful. Let's go to our Twitter account and refresh our Twitter page. And there we go. It tweeted, "I love dogs," with this picture from the internet. So that's it. That's how you do it. If you got questions, if you've got concerns, if you've got thoughts, I would love to hear them. Put them in the chat below. I'd be really curious to hear your feedback, or what you think, what you like, what you didn't like. I'm going to put this code out here in GitHub as well. So I'll put that link right below. In this video, we walk through a couple of different examples for how to build a Twitter bot. I really hope this has helped you, and if it has, do me a favor, like this video and subscribe to this channel. That would really help me out. I really appreciate it. And as always, have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for watching, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks.